Hey guys, before we get too far in today's video, I just wanted to say that there's so many people that I have to thank for this video specifically. It's taken me a really long time to put together, but I think that the end result is going to be well worth it. You'll see here in just a moment. Stick around until the very end. We're going to give a special thanks to every single person who helped make this video come together. But until then, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's video.
Go!
You ready to do this?
Let's get lit, man. Let's do this. That looks nice.
Okay, so first stop, we're going to the Alamo.
Never forget.
Never forget, and that's kind of the whole purpose. There's nothing baseball related there, but a daily reminder that you cannot forget. From there, we're going to go to the Menger Hotel.
We're gonna have a day.
Oh, we're going to have a day of it. We are here at the Alamo this morning. This has nothing to do with baseball or the content coming up. Really, we're more interested in the Menger Hotel. It has a lot more historical context as far as baseball, which is the whole purpose of what we're looking at today. Because anywhere else that we're gonna go, we're really not gonna see any plaques or history or any markers to let you know that where we're at was in fact once home to professional baseball in San Antonio. The New York Yankees have in fact played here in San Antonio a number of times. We're interested in this photograph specifically because we can see right here in the middle we've got Babe Ruth and the rest of the 1922 Yankees. This was back when they played at Ballpark Stadium. Come over this way, I want to show you something too. You kind of have to ask the right person to give you a real answer on this. But apparently there's a ghost in this photograph. If you look close enough, you can see here this woman right here, apparently not a part of the rest of this group of people in this photograph. Not only baseball, but ghosts in this hotel. This is actually a pretty genuinely haunted hotel. I'm not even being funny, I've actually had some pretty spooky experiences in this hotel, but back to baseball. This truly is one of the few pieces of physical evidence that exists in San Antonio to let you know that there was professional baseball here. Actually, this photograph is 100 years old. I just put that together in 1922 to 2022. That's pretty cool.
Good math, buddy.
Yeah, quick maths. All right, let's get some coffee.
Kind of, yeah. No, that's good. I like that. I like that.
He's making a stoic face. He's like... So our first stop of the day is over here in Government Hill. I'm standing in front of what was formerly known as the Edwin Terrell estate, who was the ambassador to Belgium back in the 1890s during the Benjamin Harrison presidency. Right on this property stood the very first professional ballpark in San Antonio. It was owned by the Professor William Muth. I could not tell you how he earned that title, professor, but in every publication that I've seen, he is known best by his title of professor, and he was an entertainer by profession. He owned this property adjacent to his saloon, his bowling alley, his beer garden. So it was kind of no wonder, it's not a stretch at all, that in 1888, when the Texas League first began play here in San Antonio, that the professor would use this property adjacent to his land to build the first professional ballpark in San Antonio. However, this ballpark was off to an extremely late start, and by the time it was confirmed that San Antonio would be playing in the Texas League, this ballpark had to be built in about a month before the first game started. Where we see grass was nothing but pebbles and stones, terrible infield that had mesquite thickets everywhere. In the aftermath of the 1888 season, after it was all said and done, there was a committee that heavily favored moving this team to San Pedro Springs. We're gonna visit there here in just a moment. There's an article in the San Antonio Light that said that Muth will tear down his baseball fence and grandstand and put the lumber into a big dance hall and pavilion. And why not? If the team's not playing and there's no ball club here, dude's gonna use it to build a dance hall and pavilion just to kind of add to his already growing empire of entertainment. Good on you, Professor William Muth. So William Muth's actual property, as far as his beer garden, the saloon, the pavilion, the dance halls, all that stuff was right over here. It's nothing but houses now, so there's really not a whole lot to see. The one thing I did want to point out, if we were to walk right over there, we could see a street aptly named Muth Street. So you're never gonna be able to forget the name Muth here in San Antonio, even though the ballpark no longer exists. The name lives on. Big props to you, Professor. I would love to grab a beer at the beer garden right now. Gonna have to get some coffee instead. Okay, before we really get any further, I kind of have to give a little bit more context to what it is that we're doing today, what we're talking about, and why. And of course, that's San Antonio baseball. It's the title of the video. It's why you clicked on it. We're looking at all the ballparks that have existed here in San Antonio. For all intents and purposes, we're going to just say for the San Antonio Missions, because this team has gone by many, many names in the past. They're all right here on the screen. I'm going to put them over your face. You can see all the team names that have existed in San Antonio baseball history, but by and large, they've been known as the Missions. And of course, the story of baseball in San Antonio has to begin with two teams, which are...
The San Antonio Mission.
Wrong.
I don't know then.
I say Joplin, you say...
Janus.
You know what? That's a good answer. We were looking for Independence, but that'll work too. I say New York, you say...
Yankees?
Close. We're going with the Giants. It's kind of not fair because like New York had so many G-dang teams. Back in 1887, John McCloskey, he pulled together a team of all-stars from Missouri. They were barnstorming through Texas, which apparently was the trend because so were the New York...
Giants.
Giants, yes. So there are a couple businessmen in Austin that kind of had this grand idea. They're like, wouldn't it be great if we could pull together this Joplin independent team with John McCloskey? There were 3 games to be played, I should say that. Who do you think won? A professional team of the National League or a group of all-stars from nowhere, Missouri?
I would guess the people from nowhere, Missouri.
Correct. That is correct. And they beat them in such fashion that the Giants didn't even show up for game 3. So they beat them out of Austin, Texas. And so there was like this great enthusiasm in Austin to clamor together some teams to start their own league here in Texas. And that started the very next year in 1888. Right over there in Mood Spot. You can't see it. We already did it. So that guy, Honest John McCloskey, was actually the...
Honest John?
Yeah, Honest John McCloskey. That's right. Honest John McCloskey. Never told a lie. Actually is known as the grandfather of the Texas League. You can find him in the Texas Sport Hall of Fame in Waco, Texas. So Honest John McCloskey kept his team of Joplin Independents to become the Austin team that played in 1888. They were known as the Austin Senators. So in that first year in 1888, 6 total teams played in what was then known as the Texas League of Professional Baseball. The Fort Worth Panthers.
Native to Fort Worth, of course.
Yeah, known for their Panthers. The Houston Babies, which is what I still call Houston Astro fans. The Galveston Giants, the Austin Senators, and the Dallas Hams, of course. And the information I found that from has hams in quotation marks. I don't know.
Just my type.
Those were the 6 teams that started in that 1888 league. So Austin actually beat the crap out of San Antonio the first time they played here, which kind of became the trend. They had 2 managers that year before John McCloskey, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit. And those 2 managers combined for a record of 6-28 in that first year for the San Antonio Missionaries.
Gosh.
Brutal, yes. Those early leagues proved to be a time of like chaos within the Texas League. Teams were folding left and right, and the San Antonio Missions dropped out after that 6-28 record. Michael, not all hope was lost. John McCloskey with his Austin team came through San Antonio and really never looked back. Old Honest John just straight up claimed San Antonio as his and just moved his team from Austin to San Antonio, kind of merged the 2 franchises together, and the rest is history. McCloskey would take that second half team to a record of 14-11. If we do some math, 14-11 plus his 24-18 gave McCloskey a record of 38-29 between Austin and San Antonio combined, which is a really respectable average. You add in that 6-28 and you get a grand total of 44-57 for 1888, which is not great.
Almost batting 500.
Apparently it was good enough to claim, and claim is a strong word. I literally wrote in that claim is a strong word, the title for that first year, because Dallas finished with a record of 55-27. But John McCloskey's like, nah, we get a piece of that. Really the only reason they could do that was because they technically finished a season, and Dallas was the only other team to do it. So again, just chaos, turmoil in these first years. It's a damn shame. We're gonna go from here to San Pedro Springs, which is actually pretty cool. There's a juicy bit of history that I'm gonna share with you there. Did we learn something?
I learned about the Joplin Independents, New York Giants, and the unnamed San Antonio team colloquially called the Missionaries.
Good enough for me. So this is Muth Street that we're on right now. We just pointed out the sign a minute ago. We're sort of right in the middle of where this property line is. So over here would have been the dance hall, the saloon, the bowling alley, the beer garden, all the fun stuff. And then over there on the right, you can see the back of the Edwin Terrell estate. That would have been right where the ballpark would have sat. Nice porta potty right there in the view. This would have been the back part of the property. Probably would have been able to see the dance hall, the pavilion. Bowling alley would have been right there And now it's all just houses. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I am saying that it is a huge bummer that you can't just go like grab a beer and dance and listen to some music. Maybe go to the bowling alley and then go to a ball game. This was kind of a one-stop shop for entertainment, was Mood's Tavern and Beer Garden. And it's no longer here. It's just houses, you know? Give and take. And I think there may have been a lot of take in this case. It is what it is. So we are here at the San Pedro Springs, which is kind of like the oldest park here in San Antonio, which I'll be honest, has seen better days. I have not been to this park in quite a while, and I'm not really in any hurry to come back here. For our purposes today, we can actually consider it to be the cradle of sports in San Antonio, which are not my words. That comes from a 1935 article from the San Antonio News-Express. It talked about all the history that took place here. That article actually mentioned that the first Union troops arrived here shortly upon the close of the Civil War and staged the first baseball game in San Antonio, which is very cool because that obviously dates everything that we've talked about with the Texas League, with the San Antonio Missions. And when the San Antonio Missions came here in 1892, 4 years removed from that 1888 ballpark at Moods, it's unclear where exactly they played at here in San Pedro Springs. I have a few conflicting articles here. There's some publications that suggest that they played on the same site as Tech Field and Electric Park, which we're going to right after this. There's an article from the Texas State Historical Association that claims that the racetrack here, which is at the corner of San Pedro and Myrtle, was replaced by a ballpark in 1892, aka the first year that the Missions played here. And that claim is supported by a winter 1995 article from Design Publication, which is actually a publication of the Park Practice Program, which is a cooperative effort of the National Park Services and the National Recreation and Park Association. That article from 1995 supports that claim that that racetrack was replaced by a ballpark in 1892. However, that is contradicted on the sanantonio.gov website. There's a PDF that you can find that shows the chronological history of San Pedro Springs that claims that that racetrack was replaced in 1902. Right over here, we've got the corner of San Pedro and Myrtle Street. We know for a fact that that is where that racetrack was. What is unclear is when the ballpark replaced that plot of land where the racetrack was, and if the San Antonio Missions actually used it as a professional baseball park for the Texas League. Again, we have some contradicting information. There's really not much to see out here. There used to be softball fields here really not that long ago. I believe that the park is just kind of getting like a massive facelift. I do know that some of these walking and running trails are fairly recent. Now it doesn't look like they're in a hurry to do a whole lot more out here. This is just kind of a barren field. Again, no plaque, no marker, no sign of life. Really, those trees over there were really nice and I miss them already. A really cool thing that I wanted to mention is that in 1897, electricity was put up as a gimmick night for like an Under the Lights theme in San Antonio. So baseball was played under the lights for the very first time in 1897. Most houses did not have electricity. Electricity was a novelty. And I think electricity is an excellent segue into our next ballpark, Electric Park, which was way more exciting than it had any reason to be. We don't really have to go that far because it's actually right over there if you look past all those buses. So what we're looking at right now, it's actually not too exciting. We would have rather been looking at, if we were in 1906, would have been Electric Park, which would have been right here, right on what is now currently the Via Bus Maintenance and Depot. This is like a big transit center for the city of San Antonio, and it's Via buses. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we come back here in a little bit. We're gonna revisit this exact location for Tech Field, but just know that Electric Park was lit, may I say. Quite literally. Electric Park opened in 1906, the same year that Electric Park opened. They were right next to each other. They were both lit up by electricity. There was a big push in the early part of the 20th century to kind of create these little amusement parks all across the country that were lit up with electricity, kind of highlighting the novelty of such an attraction. The Electric Park here in San Antonio had a midway, a Ferris wheel, a roller coaster, and the ballpark was right next to it. So again, talk about a one-stop entertainment mecca of San Antonio. Kind of had everything you needed here. What's also really cool is that this ballpark, as far as I can tell, showcases the first example of black baseball in San Antonio. Fortunately, this was a time when the country was still very, very segregated. But if you were here at Electric Ballpark between 1906 and 1912, you would have got to have seen the great Smokey Joe Williams, who is without a doubt one of the greatest pitchers of all time. He's actually in the Baseball Hall of Fame, would have set all kinds of insane records if he had been playing in Major League Baseball. Unfortunately, because of that segregation, a lot of his records, a lot of black baseball records in general, are kind of lost. But we do know without a doubt that Smokey Joe Williams, one of the greatest pitchers of all time, pitched right here in this Via Bus Depot at Electric Park here in San Antonio. After the 1912 season, they did move to Block Stadium. Their owner, Morris Block, moved them into the state-of-the-art ballpark. In fact, that's coming up right now. That's where we're headed, is Block Stadium. We'll be right back here in this pretty much exact location, kind of get a better view of this bus depot, talking about Tech Field. But for now, let's take it to Block Stadium. This guy, we are dragging ass right now, and I'm only getting hungrier. No, I'm not gonna get him.
Why?
Because it's rude. I'm not
What are the horns for?
I'm not a mean man.
Tell us in the comments.
It's just a Sunday driver. Goodness gracious. Morris Black, cigar store owner, had a shop on Houston Street. It kind of worked double in his favor because what he would do is he would sell tickets. You buy a cigar and a ball ticket. One-stop shop. That's kind of the trend of today's video.
Efficiency.
One-stop shop and efficiency. All these places in San Antonio that you can no longer go to get everything your heart's desired. It only lasted until 1927 when this ballpark was taken down, and I just made the wrong turn. That's also been a trend, it's just going the wrong direction. And what wound up happening was after this ballpark was sold by Morris Black, it was his ballpark, he built it, he could do whatever he wanted with it. It was eventually torn down. He used the grandstand, sold off the lumber and that kind of thing. With the condition that it was torn down, he built 2 new streets that went through it. And that was a big clue of finding where this ballpark was. Because again, finding the locations has not been super easy. But it wound up being up here on the corner of Carolina and Presa, which is insane because this is right by where I live. This is something I drive by 100 times a week. It was right across the corner from Brackenridge High School, which has actually changed a lot too. Finding old photos of Brackenridge was fun. I believe that Carolina Street and Playmore Street were the 2 new streets that were built on top of the property. Again, we're wildly speculating here.
After the break, where is Leslie Knope actually born?
Pawnee!
We will pull out the world map and speculate wildly.
Oh God, not the gotcha dancers.
He's making an educated guess.
An
The
educated guess.
maps really do show that after a certain point when this ballpark would have been built, that these new streets appeared on maps that formerly they were not on.
Thank you for backing me up on that. Not a lot of commercial really exists on those 2 streets now, except for a bomb little Mexican restaurant, which is where we're going to for lunch. Yeah, they look closed too.
No!
All right, we're at the intersection of Carolina
And
St. Mary's. This is where the ballpark would have been, right in front of us. Las Tapatías de Jalisco is closed, and Google Maps said they're open, so this is a huge letdown. But what we're seeing right here, where there would have been a ballpark, this would have been Block Stadium. This is sitting kind of at the corner where I believe that the home plate entrance would have been. So let's go check it out. No tacos or anything right now. That sucks, but we'll figure it out. Lunch can wait. So this is Block Stadium. I guess more specifically, this is the center field corner of where Block Stadium stood. All of that is behind us, and I'm going to show that here in a second. That church right there, which is now the St. Anthony Orthodox Church, used to be the United Pentecostal Church. And the significance of that is, once again, exhibition game. The New York Yankees played here, and Babe Ruth hit a home run out of this ballpark. It bounced off the street here in Presa and landed and actually hit the front door of what was then the United Pentecostal Church. I actually confirmed that with Father David Wooten. Shout out. Thank you very much for your replies. So pretty cool. Babe Ruth, once upon a time, hit a home run out of here, landed on the front door of that church. If we turn and look this way, we would have been able to see Brackenridge High School clear as day because it's actually moved a little bit closer than where it's currently standing. So when that stadium was torn down, again, these 2 streets went through it with the goal of this being used for commercial. I'd say historically, it's probably seen some better days. There's really not much that stands here at the moment. Nothing really consistent anyway. According to the San Antonio Light, an article posted in 1912, this ballpark was one of the finest in the South. It far surpassed any other baseball plant in the Texas League. Even 100 years ago, this was the place to be. A big poppin' stadium, beautiful history. Where there is loss, there is growth. This is beautiful. If I were to walk this way, actually, I probably would have been standing kind of right in the middle. This could have been the pitcher's mound, maybe second base. You can see the Tower of America is pretty clear. Not a bad location, but not a whole lot's been done with it. It smells like paint. pretty hard. You can stand here and get high off the fumes. Who knows what's to come of this area, what it'll be. For right now, just kind of is what it is. You either know about it or you don't. But Block Stadium was right here. I am getting so hungry though. We're gonna go check out Tech Field at the Pearl, and hopefully we're gonna grab ourselves a bite to eat. British Columbia plates too, by the way. Beautiful BC. I gotta make them. I think that's the only time. I've lived in Montana most of my life. I don't think I've ever seen BC plates, but I found them right here in the center of San Antonio, in the center of Southtown. Beautiful British Columbia. We love to see it. We're here at the Pearl. Let's go. imagine yourself, it's 1923, and you're at League Park here at the Pearl, which by today's standards is by far the ripest little piece of real estate that a ballpark could exist here in the city of San Antonio. The Pearl itself has a ton of unique history, and we could probably do a whole other video about the Pearl specifically. The important thing to note is that the main landmark building here used to be a brewery for the San Antonio Brewing Association. So back in the day, specifically in 1923, you could come here to the ballpark, enjoy the beautiful Riverwalk, enjoy a nice tasty beverage at the Pearl, and then watch a ball game. I'm standing right at where home plate entrance would have been. We're using the Pearl as a backdrop because it's a little bit sexier than what's right in front of me, which is actually where League Park existed from 1923 to 1932. We've talked about Babe Ruth a lot, and after this I promise I'm going to be done torturing my audience with Babe Ruth stories. But Babe Ruth actually played here, surprise surprise, in 1930, where the home crowd would see Babe Ruth go 3 for 3 with a home run, 3 RBIs, and 4 runs. We are here at the corner of Josephine and Isleta Street. To my right is where the ballpark would have stood, League Park. The reason this ballpark doesn't stand here anymore, in 1932, it tragically burned down. And it's not 100% certain what caused the fire, but what we do know is that the grandstands at that time were all wood, and that it was most likely lit perhaps by a cigarette or a match that wasn't quite put out all the way. And there was a fire brigade that did its best to put it out, but by the time the flames died out, the ballpark was long gone. No lives were lost, but one house did burn to the ground completely, and many homes were damaged as a result of that fire. Now, what would have happened for most other teams during this time, most teams would have folded or moved on to a different city without a home to move to play their games. Fortunately for San Antonio, they were able to move in directly to Tech Field, which was owned by the San Antonio School of Technology, which would later become Fox Tech High School. But yeah, that would have been right here at the corner of Isleta and Josephine Street. What stands today is a parking lot and plant for a pharmaceutical manufacturer. It's called DPT. I couldn't tell you what that stands for, and I couldn't tell you what they ultimately make. It doesn't really matter. I'm sure they're doing well and doing successful. But where they park their vehicles now stands where that ballpark used to be. And once again, a theme of this, we see no plaques, we see no specific piece of history showing that this was once home to professional baseball in San Antonio, Texas. And with that being said, it is beyond time for lunch. There's one place in particular that has been calling my name for the last hour and change. We're gonna head there. I think our food's coming soon, so I'm gonna cut this short. But this is by far one of the coolest pieces of Missions history that exists in San Antonio. And you can find it right here at Down on Grayson Restaurant, of all places. This is the team photo from 1937. Pretty sweet. Okay, so we're back here at the same property that we were at a little bit ago for Electric Park. This was Tech Field, which was, I don't want to say built in 1932, it's been around for a long time, but the Mission started playing here in 1932, immediately after the burn down of the old ballpark there at the Pearl that we were at a little bit ago. What was really cool is that Fox Tech owned this property, and they did all the way up until it was sold in 1946, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Point is, the Missions played here during that time, and it actually introduced the very first affiliation of a major league team. The St. Louis Browns bought this team in 1933, which is the very first time that there was affiliated baseball here in San Antonio. And it wasn't exactly the warmest of welcomes because the Browns historically were not very good. They didn't actually start doing their spring training here until 1937, so it kind of took a few years to get warmed up to the idea of having the Browns here. We're gonna talk about the Yankees one final time because I'm tired of talking about them. They did play here. Checking the notes here, Joe DiMaggio actually went 3 for 3 with 3 triples, and the Yankees went on to beat the Missions, unsurprisingly, 16-4. There was no Texas League whatsoever in 1943, 1944, and 1945 due to World War II. So in 1946, kind of the end of the run here for Tech Field, it was sold for $160,000, a pretty handsome price then. The Browns chose not to continue or extend their lease on the property, so bye-bye Tech Field. But at that point, it was gonna be Hello Mission Stadium, which was a much nicer stadium. Kind of got to take the good with the bad. It was a state-of-the-art stadium. That's what we're going to head to next. I'm much more excited to talk about that stadium than I was to talk about the bus depot, which we can see to our left. Via. This is about as good as we can get as I'm running into bushes as far as being able to get some shots, because there's a big barbed wire fence. There's a big, massive building over here. It's all kind of blocking where you would have been able to see Tech Field. Kind of a shame that there's no history. Again, that's kind of the theme today, is that we're not going to see any plaques, no markers, nothing to designate that, like, hey, this was a pretty neat spot. A lot of history. Instead, you get a bus depot, which, you know, people got to get to work, people got to get places, and they got to be able to maintain these buses. So it is what it is. Take the good with the bad. We're going to Mission Stadium next, and I'm actually one of the stadiums I'm most excited to talk about.
Say it ain't so, I will not go. Turn the lights off, carry me here.
Welcome back to a little fireside chat here at the Juvenile Detection Facility in San Antonio. Where we're sitting right now would have been the home plate entrance for Missions Stadium, which again was absolutely state-of-the-art. This was still during a time when the St. Louis Browns owned the team, and they spent $700,000 of their own money on this facility. When it was finished in May of 1947, it was without a doubt the best stadium in the Texas League. One really cool piece of history is that in 1949, a couple years after it was built, Jackie Robinson played here. This was 2 years after he broke the color barrier with Major League Baseball. In 1962, the National League went through an expansion where they added the Houston Colt 45s, which is cool because they eventually became the Astros, and I hate the Astros so much, but Colt 45s, I gotta give credit, that's a sick name. During that 1962 change, we saw a big one here in San Antonio as the team actually became named the Bullets. The idea was that the Bullets supplied the ammo for the Colt 45s in Houston. During that time, specifically 1964, San Antonio saw arguably its best player that's ever played here in San Antonio in Joe Morgan, Baseball Hall of Famer, one of the greatest second basemen of all time. That was really ending the history of this stadium on a highlight because in 1964, the team was sold to a group in Amarillo, and that was kind of the end of San Antonio baseball temporarily. It's worth mentioning that in 1965, the Astrodome was built, so there was a much bigger market here in South Texas to go more towards Houston, being the bigger team, actually playing in Major League Baseball, kind of the end-all be-all, the demise of Mission Stadium. And in 1965, this stood completely empty. And it would until it was torn down in 1974. Nothing else remains of the history. Again, we're at a juvenile detention facility right here on the corner of Mitchell and Mission. No other remnants of Mission Stadium. It's completely gone.
The next day.
We got a little wardrobe change. It's a new day, got a new ballpark. We're actually starting off today with one of my favorite ballparks in San Antonio, and there's a reason for that. We're at Pittman Sullivan Park currently, and the field here is named after Mr. Charles B. Shannon. This is the memorial stadium for this gentleman here, dedicated to this veteran ball player, coach, and tireless public servant. The whole creation, the purpose of this ballpark first came to attention in San Antonio in 1920, and it was a place dedicated exclusively for black baseball and the eventual Negro Leagues that came and played here, using Pittman Sullivan Park as the host for those games. On April 15th, 1947, Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier by becoming the first Major League player who was black to step on a baseball field and play professionally for the Brooklyn Dodgers. Now, this didn't ultimately kill segregated baseball and the Negro Leagues across the country, but it was kind of the catalyst for its decline. Fans really began to lose interest in these segregated Negro Leagues as, quote, the African-American baseball fans began to look more to integrated baseball teams as sources of community identity. Today, Pittman Sullivan Park is survived by sandlot baseball, which is kind of one of my favorite things that have sort of taken off across the country, and it's been flourishing here in Texas and San Antonio specifically. I made a video about it. You can click here and check it out. It really is just a grassroots approach to baseball, just kind of stripping it down to its bare essentials. You got players who just want to come out and play ball, and they do right here at Pittman Sullivan Field. Battling the wind, so we're gonna roll with the flying chanclas here for a moment. A big prominent player in the history of Pittman Sullivan Park is Odie Davis Jr. Odie Davis Jr. created the Denver Heights Bear baseball team, which is actually the neighborhood that we're in right now on the east side of San Antonio. The Denver Heights Bears attracted east side talent to create an opportunity to play, to grow as players, and to challenge any team that wanted to play them. His son, Odie III, would go on to play for the Texas Rangers and the Cleveland Indians professionally. His other son, Nathaniel, coached and managed the team all the way up until 2005. The YMCA right over here is actually called the Davis Scott YMCA, and it is partly named for Odie Davis Jr. Now, sadly, there's so much history that's lost in black baseball across the board. Many times these leagues weren't considered as professional or legitimized as their white counterparts. Fortunately, many of these teams that played here in San Antonio exist permanently at the San Antonio African American Community Archive and Museum, also known as SACAM, and we're going to go there in just a moment. I wanted to highlight a few players that are actually in Major League Baseball's Hall of Fame, enshrined forever in Cooperstown, New York. They include Raleigh Biz Mackey, Willie El Diablo Wells, and of course Smokey Joe Robinson, who we talked about a little bit previously. I think what's great about a lot of these records when reading and researching black baseball is that by and large, just about every single player had some kind of nickname. I really think it just kind of adds a layer of affection to these players and the way that they were viewed from the community and the passionate fans that would come out and support these players. It just adds this extra layer and component of love and passion to the teams and the players from their fans. I love that. It always puts a smile on my face. The current missions team has actually honored and acknowledged the history of black baseball here in San Antonio. They've worn uniforms of prior black baseball teams, most notably on Juneteenth, which is a holiday that was first observed in Texas that celebrates the freedom of enslaved people from the Emancipation Proclamation in 1865. So let's go ahead and make our way up there. So a bit of bad news. Unfortunately, the museum did not have what I was looking for as far as black history of San Antonio baseball. Can't really fault them too much. It's a very small museum, as you can see when you walk in. There's really just kind of 2 rooms, and they do have some things that kind of rotate in and out. Unfortunately, there wasn't anything on San Antonio black baseball at the time. I was very happy though to get this book right here. This is a book all about Biz Mackey, who we mentioned while we were over at Pittman Sullivan. So this is a book I'm very excited to read. It is actually signed by the author, Rich Westcott. And that, when combined with this book right here, which is where I've been getting a huge chunk of my information for researching this specific topic. This is a book called Playing in Shadows. It's about the history of black baseball in Texas specifically. This is written by Rob Fink. Strongly recommend this book. This features a lot of what we've been talking about, not just with Pittman Sullivan or San Antonio, but Texas black baseball in general. This is an excellent book to check out. I do know that SACAM here is actually looking for a more permanent location, something a little bigger to house more exhibits and kind of more information on different topics and specific things they want to curate. Maybe when the time comes, we can come back and revisit the specific topic in a museum. But as it is, I kind of oversold and underdelivered with the content that I thought we'd be able to get. But you know what? I do not fault them at all. Still a beautiful museum, great staff too. And I was really happy to finally be able to check it out after living in San Antonio for over 2 years now.
The next day.
Can we do it with that camera too? Because that's what's gonna get the audio.
This?
No, the actual, the camera. Do you have the camera?
Oh, I thought you grabbed it.
I didn't grab it. Oh shit. That's okay. Can you grab my backpack? LOL, we're off to a great start. We're driving down here on Calabar Road, over on the west side. We're going to St. Mary's University. It was the former home of the Missions for almost 3 decades at a stadium known as VJ Keefe Stadium, and it is still currently in use for the St. Mary's Rattlers. Go Rattlers. So there was kind of this clamor once the team was sold to Amarillo to get San Antonio another team, and it took 3 years. Eventually they would wind up here at VJ Keefe Stadium. I'm really excited to get there this morning and show it to you guys because there's some really great history and there are some phenomenal people that were involved in making this ballpark happen. It was really kind of a scrappy effort to get this thing together, and we'll see how here in just a minute. During those 3 years that San Antonio did not have a team, there was, as I mentioned, a huge clamor to get another one here in San Antonio almost immediately because the league was more than struggling. So the league president, Brian Bragan, and former league president, Dick Butler, amazing name by the way, decided that San Antonio needed a team ASAP. So Brian Bragan contacted the only man in San Antonio with a ballpark at the time. His name was Elmer Kosub. He was the athletic director and baseball coach here at St. Mary's University. Now this field at the time was absolutely tiny and not suitable for the Texas League at all. It was a huge downgrade from Mission Stadium. Kosub was quoted as saying that you couldn't fit 3,000 people in here if you pushed them in. But Kosub and local attorney Henry Christopher went to the 1967 Major League Baseball winter meetings in Mexico City, and they cornered Cubs owner Philip Wrigley, and they convinced him to bring affiliated baseball back here to San Antonio. And what's really, really cool and very historic about this is that this was the very first time that a pro baseball team made a deal of this type with a school. That was something that at the time the NCAA absolutely forbade. But St. Mary's University at the time was an NAIA school, so it was totally cool. As I mentioned, this field was not ready for play when the Missions came here. It was a Frankenstein field that actually took all kinds of scrapping together to get ready for their ultimate return. There was a group that came together known as the San Antonio Sports Association that pulled different parts from all over the state, all over different stadiums to kind of add onto this field and make it appropriate for Texas League baseball. The light towers and reflectors came from a field in Dallas. The transport trucks for those lights were actually donated by the Wolff family, who we're going to talk about here shortly as well. And VJ Keefe, for whom this ballpark was named for, actually probably did the most amount of work. He was a local cement contractor who supplied surplus concrete to the stadium. He donated some of the budget, and he co-signed a loan on this park to make it happen. So putting all those parts together was what allowed this stadium to become what it was. And actually most people that I talk to in San Antonio, if they're gonna talk about kind of like old memories and favorite moments of coming out to Missions games, they're almost always centered around VJ Keefe Stadium, which was the home to the San Antonio Dodgers for quite a long time. This is where a lot of like iconic household names came and played in San Antonio. I'm gonna put a small list here on the screen. You can see some of like the iconic players that have come and played here and called San Antonio their home for at least a piece of their time. I believe that's why there's so many Dodger fans here in San Antonio. There's probably other reasons to that, but so many people that I talk to love the Dodgers, and I can see why. For over a quarter century, this is kind of what they grew up watching, rooting on their guys, rooting on San Antonio, and ultimately rooting on the Dodgers. I'm not a Dodger fan myself, but I gotta say that's pretty cool. And the coolest thing about this stadium by far is that it's still in use today. The St. Mary's University, the Rattlers, they play all their home games here. It has since been renamed to Dixon Stadium, but it's still just as beautiful as it was when it first got Frankensteined into Missions baseball in 1967. Pretty awesome. Everything has kind of come to this as far as all the ballparks have led up to where we currently have Missions baseball as of 1994. But the big thing I wanted to point out before we even walk in, the exterior of this building mimics the bell towers at Mission Concepcion right next door to Old Mission Stadium. You can see on either side these big, large towers that are mimicking those bell towers from that Mission. It's just an elevator on each one that'll take you up to the concourses and ultimately up to the press box. But like, what an entrance as you're standing right here behind home plate and get these grand towers kind of meeting you. It's just bold and in your face. It's very cool. It makes for an excellent entrance coming into this ballpark. So what we're gonna do is gonna walk in, take a look at it. I'm gonna show you some cool stuff. Very excited to end here at Nelson Wolff Stadium. Let's check it out. Just a quick history here. The stadium was named for Nelson Wolff, who we actually mentioned just a minute ago over at VJ Keefe Stadium. He was the mayor of San Antonio from 1991 to 1995, and he was an avid baseball fan that had been looking to give the Missions a new home, really kind of since he became mayor and even leading up to that. As a little side note, he now serves as the Bexar County Judge. Shout out Nelson Wolff. In 1988, David Elmore bought the Missions when they were still playing at VJ Keefe, and he actually inherited the lease at the time and inherited all the pressure from the Dodgers organization to either upgrade the stadium or move the team to a new site. And we actually see a lot of current parallels to that situation today as far as the team needing to either upgrade the stadium or move it all together. But the stadium there at VJ Keefe was in desperate need of repair as far as having way too few amenities, way too few seats. It really just needed a massive overhaul, and they decided that the best thing to do would be to just move the team all together. And in 1994, this is what we got. Directly across from us is Lackland Air Force Base, which is really cool because even though you're not gonna get any downtown views per se, you are without a doubt gonna be able to see some planes either landing or taking off at Lackland during ball games. So it makes for a very unique backdrop for San Antonio baseball, and it's very appropriate being the military city here. The future of this team, and its home specifically, are changing rapidly. There's a group of investors known as Designated Bidders LLC that is currently in the process of purchasing the team, and the deal is set to finalize later this month. So by the time you're watching this, you might have to go check the news and see what is the latest as far as this deal, because again, it's happening a lot faster than maybe expected. All right, I'm just gonna go ahead and save you the suspense here. So as of the publishing of this video, Designated Bidders LLC now owns the team completely. It's a group of investors. I'm gonna put up some names over here for some of the folks that make up Designated Bidders, and you're gonna recognize a couple names, including Dave Robinson and Manu Ginobili. You are reading that correctly. Those two Spurs superstars do have an investment to the San Antonio Missions, and that's awesome. It's worth noting too that Ryan Sanders Baseball will operate the Missions going forward. Ryan Sanders Baseball is owned by the families of MLB superstar Nolan Ryan, who's in the Hall of Fame. Now, this is the same company that founded the Round Rock Express, which is the AAA affiliate for the Texas Rangers up in Round Rock, Texas, as well as fellow Texas League member the Corpus Christi Hooks, who play over in Corpus Christi, Texas. Ryan Sanders Baseball developed the ballpark for both of those teams, and they are state-of-the-art, especially compared to some of the other teams in their respective league. And if the Missions can get even just a fraction of what both of those ballparks are, we're going to be in really good hands. Now, one of the big players here for Designated Bidders LLC is a guy by the name of Graham Weston, who is one of the co-founders of the development group Urban Weston, which is the development group that's kind of in control as far as finding a location and building a new ballpark for the Missions, which they're really trying to do, especially putting it downtown specifically. Randy Smith, the CEO of Weston Urban, was quoted as saying, "We believe our city needs a vibrant stadium where pedestrian-friendly business, recreation, public spaces, art, and culture attract the talent of today and tomorrow." And honestly, I couldn't have said it any better. That is exactly how I feel in terms of this push for building a stadium downtown. I think San Antonio has needed this for so long. I mean, I love Mission Stadium personally. I have so many great memories from working there the last few summers. I've always felt that a downtown stadium is really what San Antonio needs, because right now they just don't have one. I really can't stand going to Spurs games because the AT&T Stadium, which is located over on the east side, is just honestly such a big pain in the ass to get in and out of. When it was built, there was this sort of promise or hope or maybe expectation that the east side would be developed into more of like a commercial, attractive place that would, you know, benefit both the Spurs, the city, Bexar County. But really, I mean, you go out there and you look at it and it's a nice stadium. They've done upgrades in the past. And they put like $150 million into renovating it back in like 2015. But I don't really care how pretty it looks on the inside because there's nothing to do on the outside or around it. It's just kind of there. You know, you show up, you watch, and then you leave. I really feel like the current Mission Stadium, Nelson Wolff, is really no different. It's just kind of a stadium that serves its purpose, and it's served it well for almost 3 decades now. But it just sits in a plot that's just surrounded by parking. There's direct access to the ballpark with a highway that you're kind of required to take. Actually, when I first moved here to San Antonio, I didn't have a car, and I was cool with that because I live in like a walkable area where kind of everything I need and where I was working at the time was within walking or biking distance. But since I started working for the Missions, there was no way for me to get around going to those games without a car. So for a while I would Uber, but that got really expensive, and I looked into the bus, but where the bus picks up and drops off is in kind of a shady, unreliable area. It was not going to be a safe place for me to kind of hang out and wait for a bus after the game, at which point I would have been looking forward to about a 45-minute ride from the ballpark down to my apartment. I did finally save up some money and got a car, and now it's a 15-minute drive in each direction. This is kind of a tangent here, but taking that highway all the time, Highway 90, is really not something I love to do, especially after the games. You just have thousands of people that are kind of, you know, pushing in line to get out and either go west or east on Highway 90. So for sold out games, you know, it can really take a while to get in or out of that stadium. But not even just from a driving aspect, you look at it and there's really no restaurants or bars or any business around the ballpark. What's the incentive for a tourist coming into San Antonio to take a rental car or an Uber and go out there to watch this game and then go back? There's nothing out there on the west side. Personally, I am all for this move to build a ballpark downtown. I think the time is right. I think that San Antonio is ready for it. This is obviously an ongoing discussion in the city of San Antonio right now. As far as this new stadium goes, it's very exciting, and I'm really excited to hear some of the comments on what people have to say as far as like yes or no. Are we excited for a downtown ballpark? Are we excited for new ownership? Tell me what you guys think. Also, if you've stuck around this far along in the video, thank you so much. Please consider liking and subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. This video has taken a few months of my life at this point as far as researching all the ballparks and then going out and visiting them and then putting this together in the edit. And I really appreciate you guys for sticking this one out. I'm very excited about this video. So please comment down below. Tell me how you feel about your excitement level for the team, where it's at, and where it's going. But in the meantime, let's take it back to Nelson Wolff Stadium. We're going to wrap this up. Thank you so much, guys.
1888 to 2022, I mean, you do the math, we're coming up on 135 years of San Antonio Missions baseball. And if everything goes well as far as this move and this changing of hands, you know, we could see another 135 years. If history has shown us anything, it's that this team will continue to thrive no matter who owns it or where the team is playing. And that's kind of the beauty of it, because it really doesn't matter where the Missions play, where the ballpark is located. It's always going to draw fans. People are going to come together, relax, hang out over a beer, over a churro, and that's not going anywhere. The only thing that's planning on changing is just the walls, the physical dimensions of where the team is and where they're playing. Beyond that, everything else is going to stay exactly the same. There's going to be Missions baseball for years, for decades, for another century, another 135 years to come. That's not changing at all.
Hey everyone, me again. I really hope you enjoyed today's video. Again, it took me forever to put this together and I couldn't have done it without the help of some amazing people. So I'm going to be putting names over here of people that I need to thank for making this happen. Meanwhile, we're going to enjoy a delicious Oktoberfest from the Texas Leaguer brand brewery. This is very appropriate, and I've actually been saving this for quite a while. So again, thank you to everyone who helped this video come together, and thank you guys for sticking around, because now I finally get to enjoy a little treat. Cheers. It's delicious.